Hello and welcome back to NHB Retro. Some of you may recall that not that many months ago I did my first video on this particular clone motherboard. It's a Syntron branded motherboard. It's a beautiful blue color, and in that video I replaced the non-standard power connector with a standard one, and it enabled this motherboard to come back to life. And it was extremely gratifying to do so. But a motherboard by itself really is not all that useful, or usable rather. And short of hanging it on my wall as a piece of art, I wasn't sure what to do next. Well, now I think I have a plan, and that plan involves this absolutely lovely clone case that I have acquired, complete with a keyboard, which hopefully works. It's in really good condition. It has a little bit of tape residue here, but other than that, it's beautiful. And while it is not the absolutely appropriate case for that motherboard, it is a clone case, so in spirit, I feel like it fits. Now, I don't have a power supply for it yet. I'm trying to come up with something that will be a little bit quirky and more interesting than just using an Apple power supply. And also, the clone doesn't quite fit into the base plate. There's a few problems there. So, my plan is to make some very, very minor modifications to the base plate in this case, get the Syntron motherboard mounted in there, hopefully connected up to the keyboard and working properly, and then get an interesting power supply in there, and have a complete clone. And honestly, even though it's not the correct complete clone, I feel like it's kind of in the spirit of clones in general that it ends up being a little bit quirky and a little bit of a mishmash. So let's get started on that. And I think the first thing we want to do is make some modifications to the base plate here and make it so that the motherboard mounts in there properly. So here we go. Okay, the first issue that I run into when I try to fit this clone motherboard to this base plate is that while there are a whole range of different holes here for mounting, I assume to accommodate slightly different boards, none of them line up quite perfectly with this motherboard. So here's my plan. I've put a bolt through the center location, which I believe is usually a bolt. And I'm going to just use that as the reference point. Now it is a little bit, that particular hole has some leeway for adjustment, but yeah, that's the plan. So let's see if we can get this lined up. And just see where the other holes tend to land now. Like I said, there's some leeway here. So that actually looks pretty good and pretty close. So just gonna see what we can do here. Just want this to be kind of straight. Okay, that looks pretty straight. So just to keep these in place, I'm going to put these bolts, and I realize I just dropped that other bolt out of there. I'm just gonna use the motherboard itself as a template. All right, let's see where that has gotten us. Okay. Well, that looks pretty doable. So now we've got the holes marked on the base plate. Let's see about just, I think I can just file those a little bit bigger and we should be in good shape. All right, I moved the holes around a little bit with ended up using the Dremel tool with a carbide burr on there. Now I have locating pins through all the holes. They all line up with the motherboard. Now I'm going to get the correct mounting hardware in here and make sure the motherboard actually mounts up. And just like that, the motherboard is now mounted fairly securely to the base. Next up will be the power supply. Now I don't actually have the power supply that I want to use for this machine yet, but I have one that should at least let me check that the holes are going to work or compatible. So let me grab that and we'll give it a test fit. And there it is with a power supply attached. Now, like I said, this is not the actual power supply that I'll be using, but you know, it's screwed down, the screw holes work, the cord reaches, so yeah, that's starting to look like something. So up next is going to be getting a speaker mounted in here. I have a spare one, I believe, that I can put in there. And then I want to deal with the keyboard. Now the keyboard, I don't know for sure that it works. The clone keyboard that I have looks pretty nice, and it looks relatively unused. But yeah, I need to determine if it actually will work here, and hopefully avoid plugging it in backwards and that sort of thing. So yeah, up next, speaker attachment, and then I'll work on getting the keyboard sorted out. All right, I've got the clone motherboard and the keyboard set up here, and I've got them plugged in. And one of the things I want to be very careful of and sure of is that this cable is plugged in the right way around on both ends. And I've marked it here front that way because I think that's what it is. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to check continuity between the ground pins over here on the power input and what is clearly the ground pins on some of these capacitors here on the keyboard. So let's just do that now. So this should be ground, and it is. That should be ground. That should be ground. Okay, so I think I have this marked correctly. So when I get this all assembled, I can trust my marking here, which says front that way. So all right, one more step down. I really hope this keyboard works. I'm not up for another keyboard adventure with my Apple IIs. All right, I've got the Syntron / Microwave Apple II clone sort of loosely set up in the case. It's got the temporary power supply, the keyboard is connected, and I have it hooked up to my TV via composite. It's of course sitting on the absolute correct pedestal for any Apple II, and that is an IBM PC, in this case an XT. Let's go ahead and flip the power on. I've got a speaker in there. Let's see what happens. Okay, we got a beep. I'm going to move you guys in closer for a direct view of the video, and got some things to show you. All right, so here's the Syntron computer all booted up, and I went ahead and tested out the keyboard and was very gratified to see that it works. In fact, all the keys work. There's the power switch, the power light rather, is actually key, and it doubles as upper lower case, which is pretty cool. Wasn't expecting that. Wasn't even sure if this computer had lowercase. So that's all really good. The keypad all works. You know, we got the number keys over here, etc. Indeed, just like I said, every key works. As I was testing, I discovered that there's some really interesting macro functions built in here, and I think they're coming from the keyboard encoder. It's the only thing that really makes sense to me. So, for instance, if I went to test the repeat key, I held down repeat and hit P, and I get print. And if you explore around, there's just a whole bunch of those mapped to various basic commands. Text, etc. So that's pretty cool. There's a whole bunch of stuff there. And then I discovered that if you hold down Control and the number keys across the top row, not the keypad number keys, but the regular keyboard number keys, these are all mapped to DOS commands. So that's pretty cool. And then I discovered that if you hold Control and Shift, it's going to ask you to program the function keys. And what it means by function keys are those control number keys. Those are mapped to. And here it'll tell you what they are all already mapped to. So that's pretty cool. And then if you hold down Control and the number keys that are on the keypad, those are all mapped to PR numbers. PR number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, etc. And then 8, I think, is right. A call. 9 is okay. Yeah. So anyway, a whole bunch of neat macro functionality. Again, I think that's built into the keyboard encoder on this clone keyboard and not into the ROMs on the motherboard. I could be wrong about that, but that just seems to be how it would naturally be set up as far as my thinking goes. So, yeah, pretty cool. Very neat to A, get the keyboard to all work, and B, to discover some really interesting functionality as part of that. So, I do have the power supply that I want to actually use in this. This is currently using my temporary power supply, but the actual power supply I want to use came in today. So let's get that set up and working. And here is that power supply. We of course need to make it. It is the universal enclosure and power supply from Reactive Micro once again. So let's get it put together. right, there is the power supply in place. I'd say it came out okay. I do, I have to admit, this power supply is not my favorite thing ever. The way the cabling and everything comes out is kind of a rat's nest. I tried to do a little bit of cable management, but and some of the construction parts of it I'm not super wild about. But it seems like it works. So let's fire up the machine. The voltages looked good. I checked them with the multimeter. Let's fire up the machine and just kind of see what we got. All right. Well, I mean, success. So let's get it in the case, reconnect the keyboard, and we'll call this a success. Yeah, let's go ahead and do that. First of all, let's do this. Yeah, whatever. All right, I'll get the case on here and we'll wrap this up. Okay, and there it is, all back together. Let's go ahead and pop this top off. It's a little bit different than a regular Apple II case, as you may have noticed. Not quite as handy and easy, but there we go. The Syntron motherboard mounted in the microwave case. Again, I've seen these cases with various badging, so probably a common one. Got the really interesting keyboard with the macro functionality in there. And the very, very quirky power supply. I did want to mention I did not install the fan option on this. I did buy it, but I did not end up installing it just because I kind of felt like this was already enough of a rat's nest, and the fans, of course, on an Apple II are not generally actually necessary. So yeah, I think that turned out really nice. I think it looks really cool. I think the system is really neat, has some very interesting features. I did want to mention I went ahead and dumped the ROM images from this machine. As I mentioned in the motherboard episode, it only has 3 system ROMs instead of 6. They're twice as big, of course. When I dumped them, they looked like garbage, so I wasn't sure if it was actually, if the dumping of them had gone correctly at first. But what I noticed, and I think I'd read about this on a forum long ago, what Syntron or whoever really made this machine did is, in order to attempt to skirt the Apple copyright on the ROMs, which, by the way, these do say copyright Syntron, so that's pretty ballsy. What they did is they switched 4 of the data lines. So I believe it's 4 and 5 are switched, and 0 and 7 are switched, so that if you take these ROMs out and you read them in a reader with regular data line ordering, they just look like garbage. But if you put them in the system, since the data lines are switched on the motherboard, it reads them just fine. So that's kind of interesting. Like I said, I dumped them and I wrote a short program to flip those bits back, and so I'm going to upload a zip file with the original ROMs, just in case you need those for some reason to put in system, and also the converted ones where they've been converted back to standard ordering of the bits. I also dumped the character ROM because it seems a little bit different too. That one I don't know if they're playing with the order of the bits. I will upload one where I flipped them as well as one where they're not. But yeah, so that'll be on archive.org or .net, I can never remember, under Syntron. And yeah, really, really interesting project. I wish I'd done this a long time ago. Of course, finding this case was kind of a neat thing, and this keyboard with the interesting macro functionality was also super cool. Um, yeah, the kind of the power supply, I guess it fits the bill and it works, which is the most important thing. Not super happy about how the wiring turned out, but anyway, I'm going to call that good for now, and thanks for watching. I have a couple of other really interesting things in the works, so look out for those. And yeah, I will catch you next time. And just one more quick note. Here's the machine all powered up and happily being an Apple II clone. Did want to just note that I went ahead and added to the inside top of the case just a little plaque just to make sure that no one at any point in the future might acquire this machine and for some reason think that this was some sort of original interesting clone that they had picked up, or that it was more interesting than it actually really is, though it's still pretty interesting. But yeah, there it is. And again, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one.